Welcome back. In this video we're going to be adding some parallax scrolling to make our scene look a bit more interesting. So what exactly is parallax scrolling? Well, it's a technique that allows us to create the kind of illusion of depth. Basically, we're going to be adding some objects that are moving in the background, and they're going to move slower than the objects in the foreground, and that tricks your eye and your brain into thinking that there's some kind of depth. The Wikipedia article on parallax scrolling has probably a good example here. So we see we've got a cloud background layer, we've got a vegetation layer, and then we've got a ground front layer. And when you put all three together, where the ground layer is moving slightly at normal speed, and then we have a much slower vegetation layer, and then way in the background we have clouds moving at a much slower rate, it kind of gives this illusion that this is closer to us than the clouds are. So we're going to implement that style of animation, and we're going to do that by adding some mountains and some clouds. So once again, we're going to use Kenny's fantastic graphics. So we're going to go to his background elements collection, and under there he has a set of flat assets, and we are going to use mountains 1, 2, and 3, which we're going to drag into our sprites folder. So 1, 2, and 3, and we're also going to add clouds 4 and 5. Get some clouds in there as well. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag them all these onto our scene. That's cloud 5 and cloud 4. And that will let us do some configuration to them before we turn them into prefabs for using in our system. So we've got clouds 4 and 5, and we're going to add mountain number 1, 2, and 3 over there for us. Let's move those along so we can see them. All right. So if we play there, we have our objects on there. Not entirely sure what that one's doing, so let's just have a look at that one. Why is that 5? Let's just delete that one and bring 5 back again. Have a look. That's a bit better. Not quite sure what it was doing there. Alright, so we've got a close there. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the sky color to a much lighter color. And we can do that by going to the main camera and picking on our background color here. And the color we are going to use is E6F4FA. Alright, so kind of this light blue color. So we run that now. We can see we have a much lighter blue color going on in the background there, with our grey clouds and our little bluish mountains over there. Now if we have a look here, you can see that our cacti are going behind the mountains instead of in front of the mountains. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the sorting layer for these. Now this is different from the layer which we use for collision detections. This is more the sorting layer at the bottom here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go add new sorting layer. We're going to add a new layer called background, and we're going to drag it above the default layer, and then we can set our clouds and our mountains to the same sort of layer. Now one thing you can do in Unity, which is quite nice, is you can select multiple objects and you can go and set a value for them all at the same time. So you see here, by selecting all of those, they are now all on the background sorting layer. So if we run that, we can see that the cacti is now sitting in front of our images, in front of our mountains. Right. So what we need to do now is make our mountains move. So just to keep things simple, I'm just going to disable the bunny for the moment. And then we're going to make our mountains move. And this is pretty easy because we can reuse our move left script that we created for moving the cacti. We can reuse to move the mountains and the clouds. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag the move left script onto cloud 4, onto the mountain, onto the other mountain, mountain number 3, and cloud 5. And if we run that now, there goes our mountains. Clearly too fast. So let's grab our clouds. I'm just going to drag that up there so it's easy to use. Cloud 3 and 4, and we're going to configure the movement for them. Actually, let's do the mountains first. We'll pick on the mountains first, and we're going to set the movement rate, which defaults to 10. We're going to slow that way down. And the easiest way to have a look at that is if we go and look at our prefabs and our cacti, we can see that our cacti are moving at 5 units per second. So to give an illusion, what we're going to say is that the mountains are moving at half that speed. So let's grab the mountains and do 2.5. And then we'll make the clouds be an even further away layer. And so we're going to move them a bit slower, and let's try 1.25 for those. So half of the 2.5. So cacti moving at normal speed, mountains moving at half the speed of the cacti, and the clouds moving half the speed of the mountains. So if we run that, that's not looking too bad, but still probably a little fast. So let's grab the mountains again, and we'll set them to be half that speed, or the same speed as we had the clouds, so 1.25, and we'll set the clouds to have a speed of 0.625. Okay, let's run that. There we are, much better. So they're moving much slower, and the clouds are moving a bit slower than them. That's looking pretty good. All right. So now we don't just want these 3 clouds, because currently what happens is, all the clouds and the 3 mountains, is once they've gone off the screen, that's it. So what we really want to do is spawn new clouds and mountains. And we can use the same prefab spawner that we used for the cacti to spawn these. But before we can do that, we've got to do a few things first. So first off, if we run the game at the moment and we switch to the scene, all we can see is all the objects scrolling along, and our destroyer is eating our cacti, but it is not destroying any of our mountains and our clouds. So if we spawn them, we're just going to have lots and lots of those running the game, which is going to slow things down. So first things we need to do is get these to be destroyed, and the way to do that is we're going to select all of those, and we are going to add a physics 2D box 2D collider. So each one now has a collider, and if we run the game now, switch to the scene tab, because they have box colliders, they can trigger the collision detection. There we are, and we're starting to destroy the instances we have. All right, cool. So let's turn all of these things into prefab. So we're going to grab them all and drag them into our, grab them one at a time and drag them into our prefabs folder. Cool. and we've got each got a name, and we can delete them, the ones we have up there as well. So we've got our clouds with our box colliders and our move left script, as well as our mountains. So what we can do now is we're going to create a brand new empty game object. So right click over here and we go create empty, and we're going to call this object our cloud fall spawner. And we're going to, like we did with the cactus spawn point, we're going to set its tag to something like this, and we can then position it just off the screen somewhere, so say over there. And then same as the cactus spawn point, we're going to add the prefab spawner script to it, and then from our prefabs we're going to get it to spawn cloud falls, so we'll drop that onto it, and then we're going to edit our curve. So from the curve here we're just going to create a curve there and one that ends at 1. Just keep it as a straight line for the moment. It's not quite a straight line. 1 to 1, yep, that's good. Alright. Alright. And we will run that. So we should have clouds being spawned. But if we look, because the clouds are moving so fast, our curve is really not doing its job, and we have just an endless stream of clouds being created. So let's fix that. So currently we spawn in every 1 second based on our curve here, but obviously that's not enough. So what that's way too fast. So what we need to do is extend it. Now we can zoom in and out and try position it, but actually if you right click on a key, you can edit a key and you can more accurately set its time position. So in this case we're going to go for 0, and we're going to set it to 10. And we're going to do the same thing for our endpoint. We're going to edit that key, set it exactly to 1. Oops. And we edit the key and set the value to 10. So if we zoom all the way out now, slide it up, there it is. By the way, I'm using the mouse wheel to slide in and out, and if you push the center button you can drag, your middle mouse button you can drag as well. So there we are. So we can see that it's between 0 is at 10 and 1's at 10, and I think we can add a middle point, and we'll edit that one as well. So at the midpoint 0.5, we're going to set it to 15. Alright, so it shoots up like that from 10. Alright, so if we run that now, we should hopefully get clouds being spawned at a slower rate as our curve goes across our 30 seconds. Alright. Cool. So what I think we can do though is we can play our curve. Instead of going across 30 seconds, we can just say 60. So the curve goes along there. And then just to mix things up a little bit, let's put our jitter at 5 seconds. So add quite a bit of randomness to our cloud generation. And here they come, cloud, and there's another one. Yeah, that's probably looking pretty good. All right, so let's add the next cloud, and what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate cloud fall spawner, and we're going to rename it to cloud 5 spawner, and we're going to tell it to spawn cloud number 5, and we're going to position it slightly differently, say somewhere over there, And let's edit the curve as well. So let's edit that, and we're going to make these go generate a lot slower. So maybe at 15, and we can edit this key, and we'll make it go up and down a few times just to add a bit of interest to the generation. And we add another key over here, edit key. Actually, we're going to need the middle one again, 0.5, and we're going to put that back at 15, and then we can edit one over here, and we're going to make it 0.75 and set it at 20, and then we can go this guy over here, edit key, and make it 15. Okay, so if we scroll that up a little, we kind of get from 15, and then at the quarter waypoint we're up to 20 seconds between clouds, and then we drop off back down to 15, and then we do that. So that just adds a little bit of interest there, and we're also going to be offset a bit. So if we run now, we've got cloud number 4 and some cloud number 5's been generated. So we should just get a little bit of randomness going on there. So our jitter of 5 means it's quite random. That's okay, so we just get some clouds coming scrolling past. I think that looks pretty good. All right. Cool. Okay. So now that we've got our cloud spawners and going, let's clone or duplicate that guy, and we're going to rename this to Mountain 1 spawner. I think we're going to leave the curve alone, just have that up and down curve. We'll drop the Mountain 1 on there, and we're going to position the mountains to be spawned from over here somewhere. Okay, so if we run that, all right, and we've got one mountain coming in, and there should be another mountain turning up somewhere. Any moment now. Here he is. All right. Cool. Now we could go out of that curve, but I think I'm kind of just happy with that there, so I'm just going to duplicate it and duplicate it again, and I'm going to call this one Mountain 2 spawner, and I'm going to put Mountain 2 on that guy, and Mountain 3 spawner, and I'm going to put Mountain 3 on there. Cool, and then I'm going to position them slightly differently as well, just to offset the starting point. Right, so if we run that, let's see what happens. Alright, so we can little clumps of mountains. And because the curve starts off without the random, we're going to kind of get little clumps to start with, and then after that they'll probably a bit more random, a bit more spread out as things happen. So got some clouds going across the top and some mountains in the background as well. Mountain 3 is our tall one. I might take Mountain 3, just pull it up a little bit so that it's a bit taller than the others. There we are, looks a bit better. All right. Cool. So, save up, and let's turn our bunny on and see how this all looks. Alright, so my bunny's jumping, and everything's looking pretty good. Got some things going on. Got some cacti to jump over. And, oh dear, we're landing on the mountains. Alright, so that's happening because our mountains, if we select on a mountain, is on the default layer, and they're on the background sorting layer, but on the default layer for collisions. So that isn't quite what we want. So what we need to do is first, let's create a new layer, and we're going to call that background. So we've got enemy, ground, and background. And then we're going to select the cloud and all the mountains, and we're going to say that the layer is the background layer. Okay, so that puts them on a separate layer, but it doesn't stop the collisioning from happening. So what we need to do is tell the physics engine that we don't want things on the default layer, which is the bunny, to collide with things on the background layer. And we can do that if we go to the Edit menu, Project Settings, Physics 2D, and what you'll end up with here is this Layer Collision Matrix, and this is where you can turn off, so you can currently see that all the layers are currently colliding with all the other layers, and we don't want default and background to collide. So if we uncheck that option over there, we should be good. This Physics 2D settings lets you change a lot of the base physics, for instance things like gravity and other bits and pieces like that, but we're just going to leave it be. We're just going to uncheck the collision matrix so that default doesn't collide with background. Okay, so if we run that now, we should be able to jump, 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 and we're no longer hitting the mountains. Well, and we shouldn't hit the clouds either. If I can get to a point where I can try double jump and try hit a cloud. Let's just double check that that's going on. And excellent, so we're not hitting the clouds at all. Cool. Alright, so we have our two background layers and everything's looking good. Now the one thing you might notice is that whilst the cacti are moving, the ground that it's sitting on isn't, so it's kind of destroying our illusion because the ground's kind of static and it looks like the cacti are kind of like driving along on the ground rather than the whole ground moving, the foreground moving. So what we need to do is animate this or move these from left to right. Now with the ground, we're going to do a slightly different approach. From instead of using a prefab spawner, which is all designed to kind of randomly generate objects that then get destroyed, really we just want to animate the ground from left to right and basically take the blocks of ground as they disappear from here and put them back on the front. So we kind of want to recycle the ground over and over again. Because we don't really need any of the randomness, and also more importantly from a performance point of view, if we keep cycling the objects from the back to the front instead of creating and destroying new objects, it's much better for memory usage and CPU usage on the lower end devices. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, firstly, to get them to move left, we're going to use this move left script, and we're going to make it move the same speed that the cactus is moving. So if we go to the grass, prefab, we can add a component, we go to scripts, move left, and we're going to set it to 5. I'm also going to disable the bunny for the moment whilst we tinker with this. And if we play and go to the scene, we can see everything going off. And because the ground has box colliders, they're getting killed by the destroyer. But that won't be a problem because we're going to grab them from over there and put them back over there. Alright, so how we're going to do that? Well, what we're going to do is add 2 new game objects. I'm going to add them to the ground here. just so that they nicely hidden behind here. We're going to create an empty, and we're going to call this start point. And we're going to set its icon to, say, a nice little green diamond. Cool. And we can then grab and drag it around. And what we're going to do for it is we're going to vertex snap it by pressing the V key. So hover over it, press V, and then snap it to that corner over there. So this is our start point. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to create another empty. And we're going to rename this to endpoint. I'm going to set it to a little red diamond. And we can then go and position it, and we're going to snap it. Once again, hover over it, press V, and then click and drag it and snap it to that point over there. And so pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to add some new code now that says to the piece of grass that if its X position is past our end point, then we're going to pick it up and move its X position to our start point. So we're basically going to flip them around as we go. Flip, 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 like that. So let's give that a try. So on our grass prefab, we're going to add a new script. Scripts, whoops, no, sorry. New script. And we're going to call this script recycler. Cool. We open that up, and in our recycler we're going to set up public transform start points, so we can set the start point onto our objects. And we're going to do the same thing, transform, and we're using transforms here so we can add game objects to the object. We save that. If we go back, we should see the script compile. We've got two publics there, and because we're not going to assign prefabs but actual real game objects, we have to assign it to the instances of the prefab. So what we can do is we can select all our prefabs, all our grass, and then grab start point and drag it onto there. Or optionally, you can select all the grass items and click that little icon over there and select in our scene our endpoint. All right, so it means we've all got all the instances of our grass prefab all have a reference to the start and the end point. And then jumping back to our code, we are going to add a bit of logic here. So in our update logic, we're going to say if transform dot position, so this is the actual position of the grass or the instance of the grass prefab. If its X position is less than our endpoint's position dot X, so in other words, it has moved past the our little endpoint marker, then we want to set its position equal to a new vector. We can just use a vector 3, and we're going to set it to the start points dot position dot X, but we're going to maintain the original transform species Y position and its Z position. Not that Z is important because we're on a 2D plane, 2D game engine, but we'll just set it anyway. So basically we're saying here, if the transform, being the piece of grass, if its X position is less than our endpoint's X position, then we're going to reset its position to be the X position of the start point and its original Y and its original Z. So we can save that up. And if we jump back to our game and run that, run that, we should see the game being recycled. There's a couple of things there. So the first thing you notice is this big gap. So if we run that again, you'll see there's this big gap there. And that's because what's happened is that this block has disappeared and jumped straight to the front, leaving a, or rather when it has been jumped, it's left a gap because of the delay. So what we need to do is just duplicate this piece of grass here and reposition it down there, and we can hover over this thing, press V, and drag it to snap it to there, and that just gives us one extra piece of grass to loop around. So let's just double check that that does what we want. Excellent. So that's much better, except that there are all these other little gaps that are appearing at intervals, and you notice they're a little bit random in the gap. So why is that happening? Well, if you remember, our move left script is designed to move left at a certain number of units per frame, but the problem is frame rates on these game engines are not always constant because the machine is busy. And so what's happened here is that as we move in our little grass points past the X position, they're not always perfectly in the past that point or on that point. Sometimes because the frame rate has slowed or there's a hiccup in the frame rate, it's actually jumped that further past there. And then when we jump it to the front, these guys have already moved on by that little gap, and so what happens is it leaves a gap in the middle there. So that's reasonably easy to fix. So basically what we want to do is when we look to move a piece from the back and put it at the front, rather than just putting it right at this point, we have to actually calculate how much further past the end point the piece of grass is gone, and adjust where it moves by that point over there. So rather than being exactly there, we're going to adjust it slightly to account for the gap, because this one's moved further forward, or rather all of them have moved further than we expected. It sounds more complicated than it really is. Pretty much what we're going to do inside here is we're going to calculate the gap, and we can do that by creating a new float. We're going to call it gap, and we're going to say that it's the endpoints dot position dot x, which is the x point, and what we're going to do is we're going to subtract from that the transform dot position dot x. So that gives us the difference between where the endpoint is and actually where the transform has moved to. So that gives us a little gap or an amount difference, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take that amount difference and we're going to subtract that from our starting point. So for instance, if I jump back to here, if this one had moved and it had, say, moved 5 units past this endpoint, what we've done is we're going to take this point minus the point of the grass, which is now 5 units past. That gives us a gap of 5, and then rather than recycling that tile straight to this point, we're going to cycle to that point minus 5, so that will close up the gap because these guys have all moved on a bit. So if we run that code now, we should see that we get a perfectly smooth recycling going on here. So as these things are going past, they're getting thrown to the front, and we have no gaps at all. And we have all our various layers going on. That's looking pretty good. Awesome. So just to test things are working, let's turn our bunny back on, save up our scene and save our project, and give it a whirl. Bunny running, jumping, jumping. Excellent. Not crashing into the background. Nope. And our grass is now moving with the cacti, so it kind of looks like the bunny is actually running forward as opposed to the cacti racing along the surface. And we're not crashing into the clouds. Awesome. Alright. Well, that's it for this video. As always, please like the video if you like it. Make sure to share it with others, and also remember to subscribe so that you get notifications when I release new videos. Thanks for watching.